When I was younger, I was a hustler and a go-getter, always looking for the next way to make a quick buck, and my mom knew an older couple from a church group who needed help around their property for a couple of weeks. Their names were Richard and Elaine, and they were both in their late 60s, old but not super old. They lived in a pretty rural area about 40 minutes away from my house. They were in one of those older farmhouses with a long gravel driveway and woods behind the property. The deal was simple, that I would stay there for a little over a week, help Richard with yard work, cleaning out the garage, moving furniture, painting a fence, things like that, and they would pay me at the end. My mom trusted them because she knew Richard from years back, and Elaine seemed really sweet the first time I met her. She was quiet, but she smiled a lot and kept asking if I was hungry. The house itself was fine. It was what you'd expect an elderly couple to live in a quiet area. Upstairs at the end of the hall was the room I'd be sleeping. On my first day there, Richard showed me around the property and then gave me a verbal list of things we'd work on, and Elaine made dinner. I noticed early on that Elaine didn't talk much, but she always had a neutral to half smile on her face. She asked my name 3 different times, to which Richard just said she forgets things sometimes. I figured he meant normal old person forgetfulness, so I didn't think much of it. That night, I went upstairs around 11 and tried to sleep. Sometime around probably 3 in the morning, I woke up and heard footsteps in the hallway. Someone was walking back and forth outside my room. I knew it. The floorboards creaked every few seconds. Maybe Richard was going to the bathroom, but the footsteps didn't go anywhere. They just passed my door, went down the hall, turned around, and came back. I laid there in the dark listening to it for maybe 10 minutes, and it got increasingly uncomfortable until they seemed to stop right outside the door. I stared at the big, dark gap under the door, and I felt like I could see the outline of 2 feet. After a while, the footsteps moved away again, which confirmed that what I was seeing was in fact 2 outlines of feet. The next morning, I mentioned it to Richard while we were outside working. He didn't look surprised. He just said Elaine sometimes wandered at night because she had bad dreams and got confused, and that I shouldn't worry about it. When I asked if I should lock my door at night, he kind of laughed and said the guest room didn't have a lock because the house was old, so I let it go. But the second night was worse. I woke up again to the same footstep sounds, except this time they were faster. I could hear Elaine muttering to herself in the hallway. I couldn't make out most of it, but I heard my name once, which gave me goosebumps. Her shadow passed under my door 3 or 4 times. I was starting to hate that large gap under the door. The doorknob twisted, stopped, and the door opened about an inch. It stayed open a crack for just a moment, and I heard a whispering voice through the crack, but I couldn't make out what was said. Then the door shut again. After that, I had trouble sleeping, like I think anyone would in my shoes. In the morning, I told Richard exactly what happened. Once again, he explained it away. His explanation was she probably thought the room was empty and that she had been doing things like that more lately. He said it was embarrassing for her and asked me not to bring it up around Elaine. During the day, she seemed mostly normal, doing things like making lunch, folding towels, and watering plants, which made the whole thing harder to process. But every now and then, I would catch her staring at me from across the room with this flat, suspicious look. It was like she didn't recognize me, but also didn't like that I was there. On the 4th day, Richard and I were cleaning out a shed behind the house. I noticed a dented metal walker shoved behind some boxes, and next to it was a broken picture frame with dried brown stains on the glass. This is kind of important for later. Later on that same day, when I went inside to use the bathroom, I noticed a long scratch on the hallway wall, about chest height, like something had been dragged across it. There were also small holes in one of the doors downstairs, like someone had hit it with something. These all seemed like signs of struggle. That night, I put my suitcase in front of my bedroom door. It wasn't heavy enough to stop anyone, but I figured it would at least make noise if the door opened. Around 2:30, I woke up to the sound of the suitcase scraping across the floor. I looked and saw my bedroom door was halfway open. Elaine was standing in the doorway in her nightgown. I saw her mouth hung open as she was heavily mouth-breathing. I said her name, trying not to sound scared, even though the sight was horrifying. When she stepped into the room, that was when I saw she was holding a kitchen knife at her side. She walked closer to the bed and started whispering something, which I quickly was able to understand as, "You don't belong here." She said it like 5 times. "You don't belong here. You don't belong here." She came all the way to the side of the bed and stood over me with the knife hanging in her hand. I yelled for Richard as loud as I could. Elaine flinched like the sound scared her. Then she turned and marched out of the room. Even the stiff way she marched out of the room was terrifying. She slammed the door and marched away. Richard came upstairs maybe 30 seconds later, acting annoyed, like I had woken him up for no reason. I told him she had been in my room with a knife. He kept saying she wouldn't hurt anyone and that she wasn't herself at night. This was officially when him downplaying her behavior began to piss me off. I said I wanted to go home, and he replied it was 3 in the morning and my mom was probably asleep. He said we'll talk about it in the morning. I should have called my mom right there, but I didn't want to make the situation bigger. I pushed the dresser in front of the door after he left and stayed awake until sunrise. The next morning, Elaine acted like nothing happened. She made pancakes and was smiling again, giving normal grandmother vibes. Richard pulled me aside and apologized, but it didn't feel like a real apology. He said Elaine's memory had been getting worse, which sounded like an understatement. When I asked him if she had ever attacked anyone before, he took a pause. Then he said she had gotten upset with a caregiver once, but that it was handled. That was the first time I realized he had definitely been hiding things from me. I told him a second time that I wanted to leave. He said he understood, but my mom was at work until late and he would drive me home the next morning after we finished one last job and they paid me. That afternoon, while Richard was outside on the phone, I went looking for my backpack because I wanted to pack early. For some reason, I found it in the laundry room. On my backpack, there was a blood stain clear as day, right on the outer pocket. I called Richard into the room and showed him the blood. He grabbed the backpack, looking a little more angry than I'd seen yet, and he told me he accidentally cut himself earlier and moved my backpack in there while he cleaned up the blood. He finished it off with a "stop worrying." I told him I was calling my mom, and he once again tried to get me to calm down. I went upstairs, packed my bag, and tried calling anyway. The call failed twice, so I texted her to come get me, but it didn't send. Richard also refused to give me the Wi-Fi password. That was when I really started to feel trapped. I had to tank through until she came the next morning. The final night, I didn't even get in bed. I sat fully dressed on the top of the blanket with my shoes on and my bag next to me. I moved the dresser in front of the door again, but around midnight, Richard came upstairs and told me to move it because it was dangerous in case of a fire. I refused at first, and for the first time, I heard him yell. He told me to move the dresser now. I complied and moved it just enough so the door could open. After he left, I waited in the dark with my phone in hand. Around 2 in the morning, I heard Elaine downstairs. She was yelling this time. It sounded like she was yelling at Richard. Then I heard glass break. Richard said her name, trying to calm her down, and then there was a loud thud, followed by him shouting in pain. It sounded like she just attacked him. I got up and cracked my door open. The hallway was dark, but I could see light coming from the staircase from downstairs. Footsteps started coming up the stairs fast. I shut my door and pushed the dresser back as hard as I could. A few seconds later, Elaine hit the door from the other side. The doorknob rattled violently, and she started saying again and again that I didn't belong here. She sounded furious. The door shook as she hit it again and again, and I heard something metal strike the wood, and a piece of the door splintered inward. My sights landed on the window, my only exit, and I decided I was jumping out. I could hear Richard downstairs groaning and calling for her. Whatever she did to him, she was about to do to me, maybe worse. I got the window up and kicked out the screen. There was a small roof over the porch below the window, so I climbed out onto it with my backpack. Elaine was still banging on the door when I jumped out. I dropped from the porch roof into the bushes below. I ran down the gravel driveway without looking back. I could hear the front door open behind me, and Elaine was yelling from the porch. She was holding what I could only guess was a fireplace poker in one hand. I kept running until I reached the road, where I finally was able to call 911 with service. The police and an ambulance showed up maybe 15 minutes later. Richard had a cut on his head and a broken wrist from trying to stop her. Elaine was taken away by paramedics. The police got a hold of my mom, and she arrived as soon as she could. Richard later told my mom that Elaine had been getting worse for months, but he didn't want to put her in a facility because he felt guilty. He thought he could manage it himself. He also admitted she attacked 2 caregivers before me. If he wasn't an old man, my mom likely would have slapped him in the face after she heard all that. I still think about how many chances I had to leave, and how many times I ignored the obvious signs because I didn't want to seem dramatic. Honestly, I feel like we as humans try to hold out our hope that things are still normal for as long as possible, that we really don't see the actual danger we can be in until it's almost too late.